Can you make 2 hours out of your time to potentially start crying in front of a camera? You've never met me. We have 7 families in the film, 7 stories that are more or less surrounding October 7th. How do we honor these stories for 5 other families? They did not get their sons back. And how to navigate that to give everyone enough time within the movie, but to then focus on what this movie really was about. You can't stay the same after your family's ripped apart. You have to do something. If all we do is remember that something was bad, then we become the victims.
This is the Weekly Squeeze. I'm Chanale on Moral Edge. Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure to subscribe, like, and leave your thoughts in the comments. I'm so happy to be here today with one of our talents on Moral Edge. I mean, the list goes on and on. Zach, you're a producer, an editor, a creative inspiration, I would say, and one of the part-time hosts on the show. And today I had the privilege of watching your work. And I am very touched and very excited about this. We have a film coming out on Moral Edge, something special for our audience, something that our team put together. And I would like to break it down and share with people why they should watch it and how impactful it is.
Cool. Well, thanks for having me again, Chanale. It's nice to not discuss the Iran war or what I like to call drama with Persia.
Yeah, it's just a quiet afternoon here in Israel. So let's make the most of it. I was thrilled to hear that Moral Edge is releasing our first film, and I was thrilled to hear that you are producing it. You are a jack of many trades, very talented, and I just, I had the front row seats, popcorn list, but still front row seats to a project that you've been working on for quite a while now, and I could just see the heart and soul throughout, okay? So let's first of all tell people the name of the film, which, by the way, is just, it gets right to it.
Right. So the film is called Just Tell Me You're Alive. And that's a quote from one of the people. We have 7 families in the film, 7 stories that are more or less surrounding October 7th. And then one of the hosts, Jen Early, is one of the, she represents her family in that story, talking about her son, Binyamin. And, she says, even before the war, because Binyamin was quite a rambunctious, adventure-seeking young man. She says, our language was, I would talk to him on the phone and said, Binyamin, just tell me you're alive. And we thought that was, when you're talking about 7 totally different stories, how do you then title it? And we're like, that was just such a powerful line. And so that was where we started it.
That sums it up. October 7th was that experience for too many families, the anguish, and that you portray in the film so beautifully. You kind of walk people through the experience of not knowing where their loved ones were or how they were suffering, especially at a time where people knew how other people were suffering. So it was just, beyond human experience, but you also come from it at a personal level and you feel that.
Right. So I think that's a good jumping off point, because what was important for Michael, who, really is the leader of Moral Edge in releasing this first film that we were doing, was he wanted to tell a story about, initially it started with, let's tell a story about hostage families. And any independent filmmaker knows that your primary job as a director and a producer is to problem solve. Because, whether it's a budget, whether it's a schedule, whether it's getting the right people at the right time, and trying to speak with hostage families was just very difficult, especially when we started this, because this was already several months ago. And there's still kind of that, the dust settling after, thank God, the final hostages were released. But it was just, they're very busy. They're also rightfully so quite protective of, it's like,
it's
everybody
invasive, you're picking a scab, it brings up old wounds. It's very intense.
Right. I think even on the opposite side, when you see, comedians like Elon Gold or Ami Kozak, because people know them, they're always being asked, hey, can you do that? It's like people only have so much time, and so trying to be respectful of that was one thing. And then for the other families where they may have been less known publicly already, especially outside of Israel, it becomes sensitive because what I'm really asking is, can you make 2 hours out of your time to potentially start crying in front of a camera? You've never met me. They didn't, at this stage, Moral Edge hadn't even really launched online. So we're talking about this theoretical thing, and it, just kind of getting in the door was the first issue we had, or not issue, but the first obstacle. And then thank God, for the families we were able to sit with, then it was, how do we honor these stories? And whether it was, the Berger or the Gilboa story where thank God their daughters lived and they have them back, what is that? How do you honor that story? And then for 5 other families, they did not get their sons back.
Right.
And how to navigate that to give everyone enough time within the movie, but to then focus on what this movie really was about, which is not Jews lost a lot of stuff on October 7th. We've seen that. We know that. We've tried to convince the world of that. Some people have listened. Some people, ignore it. But that the way Jews, and I would say even Israelis, even to another degree, they deal with loss, tragedy, adversity in a way that I think is really, it's beyond admirable. It's something that if you didn't do it, the alternative is you just start going down. And, in the end of the film, what you'll see is, for example, one of the families, the Masika family, their son was, sorry for the spoilers. There will be a few spoilers, but, you've been warned. Their son went to Nova, and they come from a family of jewelers. And when their son, Adir, wasn't going to be able to build his own house in Israel alone, his father, he said, post on Facebook, I want to donate a diamond ring to the first soldier who's on vacation from the war so that he can get engaged and build a house in Israel. That one ring, I believe, is now, they're close to 1,000, if not gotten over.
And 3 babies.
Right, 3 babies. And I can reveal here that my wife and I, during this process, we actually went and met the Masikas. We made our wedding rings in his office. And I think those wedding rings must have some special power because we got married a week and a half before the war started in February. And we are now expecting a baby coming soon.
Oh, wow, b'shah tova.
Which I think, the war was trying to stop the Jews from growing. And I think between Adir and God, we're now seeing more babies coming just from this one person.
It's so beautiful because you watch their stories and you don't shy away from sharing their pain. And there's footage there that reminds you of the horrors of that day. And then you see it from their perspective, knowing how it unfolds. And instead of hearing rage, resentment, anger, disappointment, you hear the opposite. You hear Jennifer. I mean, she's one of the most incredibly inspiring people, but you hear her tell Binyamin's story. And when I say story, it's because the story of his life comes full circle. When you watch it on camera, the way he lived and then ultimately died for the land, it's so inspirational. And again, you just see these 7 families and the message comes across so clear. They hurt us and it was awful and we suffered and we're never going to stop suffering because it's not something, this loss is not something that ever goes away. You just make bigger space for it and you live around it, but it's always there. But we're going to make the most of it and we're going to give back. And that's how we are going to keep our loved ones' spirits alive. And here we are, thanks to you and your team, we're keeping their spirits alive. We're sitting here discussing, talking about them, and their legacy lives on.
Yeah, so first I want to give Jen credit because at the end of the movie, you see that she was also part of the interview process with several of the families we sat with. In addition to really bearing her soul in a way at Beit Binyamin, which is the house she and her husband kind of established to help people in their situation, people who survived Nova, people, other bereaved mothers who I interviewed there, to make sure that Binyamin, who definitely fought knowing that he was risking everything, but to him, and she says it, is like, there was no other option for him. This was the way he was. It wasn't something even she necessarily pushed onto him, although I'm sure, they're very strong Zionist parents. But it's just, I don't know, it's so powerful. And then Jen and I, because we had a couple interactions before being in Moral Edge and everything else, I just allowed her to kind of be herself. And sometimes she's so strong and she's so resilient that it was kind of refreshing to then see how that very kind of raw feeling of what it must feel like to lose a son. And, for me personally, part of, I suppose, my motivation for this was a lot of my career in storytelling began when my brother passed away in high school. I ended up having a teacher who mentored me, and I wrote an essay that got published in an evangelical magazine that's very, very widely subscribed to. And, from there, I suppose whenever there was death, especially for young people would call me as if I had any sort of, degree in it other than that experience. And when I moved here, it was a year after the war started. Part of what I would, say was a mission was to start telling stories in a way that was not focused on politics. I'm not interested in, quote unquote, fighting anti-Semitism in the way that I see every day, but to show the humanity of all these people. And, you hear one of the mothers, Naomi, she says, we just want the world to know what happened, that we didn't start this war, and we just want to end it because, what she also says is one of her son's goals in life was so that, Israelis can live in peace in the South or in the North for that matter, because right now Hezbollah is, causing chaos. And I think that's really what the movie was about is, okay, this all happened. We know it. We don't need to necessarily review it, although I think we go through the first half of the movie, you really feel what it was like for them. But then every day after is, I think, the hardest thing. It's like when you get married. You can prepare for a wedding. You can get everything going right, but if you're not prepared for the next day.
Yeah, you need to recommit every single day. You need to, and that's what the interviewees express, because they all say it's murder, it's terrible, it's awful, but they've chosen, and you watch this in the film, they've chosen to redirect those emotions and do something productive. And that's actually something we see widespread across Israel. It's not a unique story to these 7 families. Because I was going to ask you, how do you even choose? There are so many stories, right? And then when you put them in one film and you watch them progress, in a parallel timeline, and you're like, you know what? You could see it across the board. Israelis are just cut from a different cloth. I reported October 7th. I'm watching back the footage now. It's jarring just to watch it. And I was safe and sound in my house. And here you have these Israelis who should still be or who might even be, but still be deeply traumatized by October 7th, ready to speak to you because you said, you know what? I'm a good Jew. We have a platform, Moral Edge. We want to share your stories because we think who you are and what you did is amazing. And they said, okay, ba'ava, let you into their homes. And Jen let her guard down. And she's, you know why? Because they're communicating to the entire Am Yisrael. It's more than just you. They want you to watch this. They have a message. And the message is, live a life that's productive and beautiful and meaningful, like my child, like my son, like my partner who gave their life for Israel.
Yeah, so this is not what I was expecting to talk about. This is a theory I've had for many years, which there are many communities in the world who have undergone horrible, horrible things and still, suffer through it. And many communities, I think, have strong narratives, but I think what has always made Judaism specifically, and even you could say Israeli or Zionist Judaism, which is to me all the same thing, is that our story is about we were slaves in Egypt, but then God took us out. And so no matter when we're at the happiest time, we remember what it took to get there. So you smash the glass at the wedding or something like that. And then, even Tisha B'Av, which is the 9th of Av, which is, when this movie will be released, you I'm actually always moved by Tisha B'Av more even than many other holidays, because it's a tangible thing that reminds us, like, we're in the state we are in right now because of what happened. And if we don't learn from it this time, then we're going to do it again, and we're going to do it again. And I think many communities, they will come together, but they don't always have that redemption aspect, that if we don't, did God take them out of it? And it's not to speak down. I'm saying we're lucky, we're fortunate, we're blessed to have that belief and that instillment in us that God didn't just make us slaves. God didn't just put us through the desert. God didn't just, we didn't just have all of these things happen. There was also this redemption aspect. And I think all of these stories, and these are just 7 of 7,000, that represent the bigger theme, which is like, no matter how low we go, and, and Alon says this, you can either go down the hill or you can go up, or you can run up. And just because you decide to run up, running up a hill is not easy. You could take 10 steps and you're like, oh, I'm doing well. And then 2 more steps later, you're like, this is really hard. And I think that's part of the humanity aspect, but it's also part of what we as Jews understand. And if you're just sitting there, you're actually going down. You're not staying the same. You can't stay the same after your family's ripped apart, or, someone's murdered. It's just, you have to do something. And I believe that we are very fortunate, because I've been at funerals with friends who also passed away very young, who were not Jewish. And what I saw was broken families with no structure. Because I've seen my parents be broken. I've seen other parents be broken who lost kids. But when you have a structure, it gives you something, and it drives you in a direction. The
support, you watch in the film how the community showed up for these families, and the families give a karat tov. They express their appreciation for that. And that's something that you saw, you still see until today. Like, no one has been abandoned or left alone, and it's, there's a big support system. But what I was thinking as you were speaking is that, so we have these 7 examples, you said, out of, so many. And you might ask yourself, okay, October 7th, September 11th, it just becomes like a date. But I remember watching these families on the news and sharing their stories and waiting for and fighting for their children, their hostages. We had Rachel Hirsch's mom, Rachel Goldberg, go to the Pope. No stone was left unturned. And we, as a nation, we rallied on October 7th, and here we are 2 years later. And I remember thinking, this is what I was saying. I remember thinking at the time, for the rest of my life, we should be talking about October 7th. We can log people's stories. We could share their testimonies, because it was a Holocaust. It was a Holocaust. And the story doesn't end. So I want people to understand that October 7th is not just an anniversary. It's an experience that changed Israelis on a fundamental level. And when you watch these stories, even 2 years later, 3 years later, you see things, you see the strength of these people. I'm telling you, even as someone who watched it firsthand, like, I'm watching Jennifer, I've heard Jennifer's story 20 times.
You interviewed her.
I've interviewed her. And every time she speaks, the way she said, Binyamin is standing behind her. I'm like, who are these people? But these are our people, and their stories need to be told, because they. So you're saying it's personal to you. Everyone who's watching, if you're not in Israel, if you're not connected to October 7th, this film will connect with you. You will respond to it, because it's real courage.
Yeah, and I could go through each family and talk about how normal they are. Meaning, even Varda, one of the mothers, she says, my son's normal. God only takes the good one. It's, nobody felt like, oh, this was necessarily had to be their calling. Although one, Eliran, I think,
the rings.
Eliran was Mizrahi. He's the one who went in. The army didn't call him. He just heard what was going on. He went and he tried to clear the street.
And posthumously, they honored his rank, right?
But I wanted to also. There was another moment, I would say, where I was inspired, and I spoke about this with Michael. I went to a screening at the Cinematheque in Tel Aviv they had done. Basically they were snippets of either people getting taken hostage and done very, very well, filmed very well, or there was one family that, they were kind of trapped in their home as the fire and the smoke was coming in, and they escaped, and they were basically they kept their baby alive with like a wet I mean, it was just crazy. And what was the craziest thing for me was after each segment that they screened, they would have the actual survivors and the actors that played them. And I noticed that the people who survived, including this couple who I believe the wife was in a coma for close to a year, they looked so much more vibrant and alive, like a real aura around them than the actors who, thank God, they're living a good life. You know, they're a lot of them are very well known. The episodes we watched were going on Netflix. So, you know, this was like a big production, but there was something so, I mean, it was just insane that it was like you were like getting this energy from them sitting in a movie theater. And it was Omer Shem Tov, who, you know, was one of the hostages, one of the well-known ones. And he was saying, because there was one of his segments where, you know, he would talk to God and say, thank you, God, every time he would get water, every time, or, you know, how are you? He would literally just ask God, how are you doing? And then
he spoke about how he just thought God was the light. And then when something expanded or got a little bit better, that became God. And eventually realized everything is God, and everything that's positive.
And and then the thing that, like, I mean, literally for 2 or 3 days after, I would find myself getting emotional into tears was he would say, you know, I was able to be grateful at every moment I could be. And that's probably what kept me alive. And to me, I was like, if this guy sitting in what we would call the definition of hell, you know,
can find the light,
can be grateful in that moment. It's, you know, what are we doing sometimes? And I think to then be able to showcase these families who many of them actually lost forever versus 2 years and will never be the same, or, you know, whatever it may be, is incredible. And I think it is important to learn, because one thing that I learned, I think, with processing things with my brother and everything else is anything that you could learn not the hard way, try your best. Because if you wait until that moment, it's going to hit you hard. And if you're not ready to pick yourself back up, or you don't have a support system, or you know, or a community like we have, it really can knock you down. And I've seen it happen too many times. But you know, this is about how not to do that, and how to take the worst day in our modern history, you know, at least tied with maybe some others in Darfur, Rwanda, but it's as ugly as it gets. And how these mothers specifically and parents really transform that into something that.
And you transformed a ton of clips into a really unique and special film. And I honestly, I'm a millennial that has probably undiagnosed ADHD and a series of other
undiagnosed,
self-diagnosed.
Okay.
So for me to be able to sit and watch this, and again, I saw all this footage. None of this is new to me, but as a storyteller and as an artist, I have to say you did a beautiful job. And I'm thrilled for us as a platform, Moral Edge, that we can present this to our audience, because it very much reflects what we're doing here. And what we're doing here is drawing attention to the incredible people that, you know, we speak a lot about Hakamat Medina, the foundation of the country, and the pioneers, and the chilutzim, and the politicians, and the all the famous Israelis who, you know, brought Israel into fruition. After October 7th, you know, people said the War of October 7th was like the War of 1967. We were born again. We were born again. They literally murdered us, and we were, because on that day, a part of us died with our brothers and sisters. And when you live here, you understand what I'm saying, because it could have been any of us. But we were reborn again, and now we're fighting to rebuild this country. Thank God the shekel's doing good, so we're doing pretty good. And we're thrilled to be able to bring that to our audience for free, just to subscribe, and that's what we're doing here in our studio as well. So I was very, very impressed by the work, and I'm hoping that people watch it and share it, and that they see the same things that we do, and the incredible Israeli people keep things moving.
Speaking of the work and putting things together, I have to credit Navi, who is a very hardworking, very talented editor and cinematographer. In fact, because we're not charging for this movie, we had the benefit of getting a lot of footage which he had shot on a beautiful red camera to add to it.
If you know nothing about October 7th, you can watch it and it'll fill you in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. So we were a very lean team, but I think it took everyone to put maximum amount of work and effort and care, because the worst when you're dealing with real stories, it's a lot different than writing a script and shooting it, because then if you decide to change or you decide to do this, all right, no big deal. But here you have to make sure that, well, there's 7 Jewish families that you got to make happy. So that's hard. No, actually everyone was really, really, really fantastic. And it's mostly just about honoring them. And you were talking about remembering October 7th. I agree. But I think remembering, unless you go into like the Shamor Zachor, like if you're going into the idea of like the masculine form in Hebrew, to remember is to take action. And I think if all we do is remember that something was bad, then we become the victims. But if we remember that this undeniably awful thing happened, it brought us together and will keep us together, then I think the movie was a success.
Well, the movie will definitely be a success if you watch and share it with your friends. So make sure to head over to our website, moraledge.com. You will see where to subscribe for free, watch the film, let us know what you think. Join the Moral Edge family, where we bring you all the incredible Israelis that keep this country thriving, ready for you to make Aliyah too. So get on that. Thank you for joining us. Zach, thank you for the beautiful film. Just tell me you're alive.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, Moral Edge. And look out for it coming to you on Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, which is July 22nd. And again, we're not charging. Just take the time and watch it.